Hi, everyone. I'm Brad Free with David Aragona. This is Daily Race Inform's Derby Watch Top 20. The Rebel Stakes last weekend at Oaklawn Park had the biggest influence on the top 20. A Derby contender emerged, not necessarily the winner, and a couple horses that were in the Rebel Stakes have been dropped from the top 20 based on poor performances. So, David, who from the Rebel joins the top 20, and who did we drop this week?
Well, the winner of the Rebel, Cole Battle, was already in the top 20, though he was on the other side in the right-hand lower corner of your screen at about 50 to 1, I think, last week. He now moves up to 15 to 1 this week. He's number 4 on Derby Watch after his victory in the Rebel Stakes. And with those 50 points that he gets for that winning performance, he will be in the Kentucky Derby starting gate as long as everything goes swimmingly over the next few weeks. It remains to be seen if he will participate in another prep race, but he's already got the points to make it into the Kentucky Derby. Maddocket Road added to Derby Watch this week after his second place finish in the Rebel, following setting a very fast pace and holding on for that runner-up slot. And the horses that we dropped, Brad, Tistastic, a little disappointing. Not that he ran so poorly, but he was already kind of on the fringes of this list, so he drops off as well. And Speed King, another disappointment in the Rebel. Not the preferred trip for him, unable to make the lead and just behind the 8-ball every step of the way, but he's going to have to do better in a subsequent prep if he's going to get back on this list.
Yeah, and First Resort has also been dropped from the Derby Watch Top 20. He was entered in Battaglia. I believe he would have been the favorite in the race. He was scratched days before and since diagnosed with a hock injury. He is off the path. So the 3 drops, Speed King, Tistastic, and First Resort, kind of opened up some spots for Getaway Car. And I know we're a week late on him. He won the Sunland Derby a week and a half ago. He has 36 Derby qualifying points already. That's ranked 3rd on the list. David, you and I added Getaway Car despite reservations if he's really a true Kentucky Derby contender at 1 1/4 miles, but his resume is not too shabby, Getaway Car.
No, he competed against some of the best 2-year-olds last year and was hardly disgraced, picking up some minor rewards behind them. And he finally got the victory last time in that Sunland Park Derby, which earned a 92 buyer. And you look at the other horses on this list, and that's right in line with the best numbers that they have been running. I have the same reservations about distance and reservations about whether or not Bob Baffert would actually want to run him in the Derby, given his running style relative to some other top contenders he has for that race. But there's plenty of time for those decisions to be made.
All the Baffert horses seem to have speed, don't they? Another horse that we added to the list was California Burrito. He won the John Battaglia in gate-to-wire fashion. And we'll talk more about the Rebel and the John Battaglia a little bit later. But David, let's talk a little bit about some of the odds that have changed. You already brought up the fact that Cole Battle was dropped from 50 to 1 down to 15 to 1. He was never going to be 50 to 1 after winning the Rebel.
No, and horses like this that have a storyline behind them, they always attract a lot of support in the Kentucky Derby. Even though his buyer, if he does not run again until Derby Day, is probably going to be one of the lower last out buyers for the horses in the field, he does figure to attract support in that race. So it's hard to see him drifting up much higher than 15 to 1 if he is in the Kentucky Derby starting gate, which it seems like he will be. So that seemed like a good price for him. And I also dropped down the price on Sandman a little bit. I didn't mention him. We were talking about the Rebel. I don't think we learned a whole lot new about Sandman in the Rebel. He made his late run, got pace to close into, was finishing at the end. He still is yet to run beyond 1 1/16. And I think if you're a fan of Sandman, you hope that he's going to do better when the distances get longer.
I was initially highly skeptical of Sandman's performance in the Rebel last weekend. I thought that given the 45 3 half mile, that Sandman, who rallies from far behind, might have had a better chance or a better finish than narrowly a 3rd place finish. I think in retrospect, I may be that criticism might have been misguided. And the reason I say that, and we'll talk more about that when we get to the Rebel, all 6 main track dirt routes on Sunday at Oaklawn Park were won by forwardly placed horses. I'm always hesitant and reluctant to, start throwing around the term track bias, but every dirt route on Sunday was won by a forwardly placed horse. And despite those fast fractions, Sandman comes from far back. He was running well at the wire. And I guess my point is I could be wrong about him. I was not that thrilled with his performance. David, you saw enough in Sandman's performance to drop his odds down a notch or two.
Yeah, and that's largely a function of the fact that we haven't gotten that many definitive results so far on this Kentucky Derby trail since we started doing this. And the one that we did get, Magnitude, he was within a few days off the trail. So at some point, as these preps get run, I got to start lowering the odds a little bit because we're getting closer to Kentucky Derby Day and there can't be that many more new developments. So that's the reason why I lowered Sandman's odds from 20 to 1 down to 15 to 1. I don't think he exactly gained in stature in the Rebel third place finish, but I don't think he really lost anything either.
Rodriguez, you dropped slightly from 25 down to 20. He runs in the San Felipe Stakes on Saturday at Santa Anita. I think Rodriguez can defeat Barnes in the San Felipe. River Thames and Sand Devil, they both run this weekend. River Thames is the favorite in the Fountain of Youth. Sand Devil, I expect he's going to be either the first or second choice in the Gotham Stakes, lowered from 40 to 35. And Chunk of Gold, slight drop from 50 down to 40. He was the distant runner-up finisher in the Risen Star. Okay, before we start talking about the major stakes races that were run last weekend in the United States, let's at least acknowledge a couple of races that were run overseas. The Hyacinth Stakes in Tokyo and the Saudi Derby in Saudi Arabia. In the Hyacinth Stakes, Luxor Cafe and the filly Promise Jean finished 1-2. Luxor Cafe is starting to gain some attention. In fact, he's on a roll right now, and he's the horse that David, you and I are going to have to be monitoring as we get closer to the final leg in the Japan Road to the Kentucky Derby Series. That's the Fukiru Stakes on March 29th. For now, Luxor Cafe is going to be relegated to on the bubble. And David, you and I were both impressed with the performance of the filly Promise Jean in the Hyacinth Stakes.
Yeah, watching that race back, it seemed like they were going at a pretty slow clip through the early stages. The entire field was really bunched up, and Promise Jean was at the back of the pack, and she made a big late run through the stretch to pass almost everybody, well, really everybody except Luxor Cafe to get up for second. She's a daughter of Nadal, the Bob Baffert trainee who had been on the Kentucky Derby Trail a few years ago, and that sire's been attracting a lot of buzz about how well his dirt progeny are doing over in Japan. So interesting to see if Promise Jean can qualify for the Derby in that subsequent prep, and the same for Luxor Cafe, who's got some real pedigree. American fans might be familiar with his pedigree as well, since his half-sibling Regal Glory was a very good turf horse over here.
Yeah, he is sired by American Pharaoh, who won the Triple Crown exactly 10 years ago. So Luxor Cafe and Promise Jean, a couple of very promising Japan-based three-year-olds that we will monitor. As far as the Saudi Derby run last week in Saudi Arabia, Golden Vekoma won the Saudi Derby. He's not currently nominated to the Triple Crown. We're going to pass for now, and we'll revisit Golden Vekoma and others from the Middle East when the UAE Derby is run in early April. That UAE Derby, by the way, that's the race to which Golden Vekoma is going to be pointed. 100 points to the winner and a virtual guaranteed spot in the Kentucky Derby. All right, the main stakes last week in the U.S. was the main stake. The main one was the Rebel Stakes at Oaklawn Park. It was postponed by one day from Saturday to Sunday due to brutal Arkansas weather. It wasn't the strongest field, and the figure came back a little bit soft in 91. But David, I think we learned a few things, some positive, some negative, as far as the Rebel goes.
Yeah, I think the positive, first of all, is Cole Battle just continues to improve and he continues to step up to the plate as the competition gets tougher and more diverse. And this was the biggest test so far because, to be honest, he wasn't beating the strongest field in this Marty Jones, his first stakes victory at Oaklawn, but he stepped up and showed that he was able to prove his class against this group. We could take a look at the replay of the stretch run of the Rebel. And I think what you have to like about this horse is the way he's able to maneuver himself into position early and then maneuver himself out of traffic and make that first run coming to the quarter pole, because he was the only horse that was able to avoid a traffic jam that hampered a lot of runners around the far turn, as some of the horses that chased the strong pace set by Mattakit Road started to go backwards. But Cole Battle was able to get out ahead of that, challenge Mattakit Road, and sail past him in the final eighth of mile. That gray streak coming across the wire, that is Sandman picking up ground to get up for third, making that belated run. We'll see if added distance does him any favors down the line. But Cole Battle, he's just been rock solid, Brad.
Yeah, he's been rock solid, and he's improving every start. Here's the one I have a couple of reservations regarding his chances moving forward to the Kentucky Derby. His trainer Lonnie Briley is currently considering running him fresh into the Kentucky Derby as opposed to coming back in the Arkansas Derby. I hope that he runs in the Arkansas Derby. If he waits more than 2 months to the Kentucky Derby, personally, I'm going to have a very difficult time supporting Cole Battle despite his 5-for-5 record on dirt. He's not that fast yet. He's getting faster, but his 91 Beyer speed figure is his career best. And by the middle of March, you generally want to see a horse running in the mid 90s, a legitimate Kentucky Derby type candidate. So we'll find out if Cole Battle does run back in the Arkansas Derby. I hope he does, because I don't think there's anything wrong with racing a horse into the Kentucky Derby as opposed to training a horse into the Kentucky Derby. What about you? If he does skip the Arkansas Derby, Cole Battle, what's your early take as far as his chances in the Kentucky Derby?
I mean, I don't love to see that. I kind of understand why. You got a horse into the Kentucky Derby. He's qualified. You kind of want to wrap him in bubble wrap and just hope you're able to make it soundly through the next few weeks. But the positive is at least he's got 7 starts under his belt. I like that better than maybe a couple of horses in the Brad Cox barn, one on the Derby watch, one that I think is on the bubble, where if they make the Derby, Brad is planning to just give them 3 career starts before that race. I prefer to have a horse like Cole Battle, even with the layoff.
Yeah, no, that's a good point that you brought up. He does have a good, solid foundation of route races under his belt, so it's not like he's going to be short on conditioning going into the Kentucky Derby. I guess the question for me right now would be, is he even fast enough to win the Kentucky Derby? And we'll find out maybe in the Arkansas Derby, maybe not until the first Saturday in May. Okay, the runner-up, Matticat Road, I thought he ran an unbelievable race, 45.72 to the half mile, 110.94 for 6 furlongs. That's the fastest fractions for the Rebel Stakes this century. I didn't go back into the 1900s at all, but those were some fast fractions. And even if the racing surface benefited his forwardly placed running style, I think that was quite the performance by Matticat Road. That's my opinion, David. What do you think about the runner-up?
Yeah, I'm really not quite sure what to make of his performance. I agree with you. He deserves credit. He deserves a pace upgrade for his performance, because that was a legitimately hot pace. And you could see the toll that it took on the horses that were chasing him, because they were basically out of gas by the midpoint on the far turn. And all the horses that finished behind the top 2 were closing from towards the back of the pack. I still have reservations about how far this horse wants to go. He has more of a sprinter miler pedigree, especially on the bottom side. And I don't know that we really got those questions answered in the Rebel, because he showed that good early speed. He took them through 7 furlongs to a mile and then couldn't see it out, obviously, due to how quickly he went up front. And I also wonder a little bit if the track was carrying him, because as you pointed out earlier, there were a lot of horses that did well on the front end at Oaklawn Park on Saturday. And it also felt like the best running was done closest to the rail in a lot of races, and he got that rail leading trip, as even though he set some very fast fractions in doing so.
Yeah, the 3 horses that were positioned closest to Matticat Road in the Rebel Stakes finished 10th, 12th, and 13th. So he was the only front runner to stick around, even if the racetrack did carry him, and it probably did a little bit. Those are some insane fractions to set and still stick around and hold on for second. As far as third place finisher Sandman goes, as I mentioned earlier, I was initially reluctant, skeptical of his performance. In hindsight, he ran fairly well, I thought, to close against the grain of the track profile that day. I don't think it wasn't a great performance, but it wasn't enough to really knock him as far as Sandman goes.
Yeah, and Sandman, like I said, is a horse that I think many who are his fans expect him to continue to get better with added ground as these races stretch out beyond a mile and a 16th. But he is a horse that we've seen is trip and pace dependent.
No doubt about it. By the way, if Cole Battle does run in the Kentucky Derby, he would be trying to become the first Rebel winner in 10 years to win the Kentucky Derby. The Rebel winner has not had a lot of success since American Pharoah in 2015. Only 3 Rebel winners actually made the Kentucky Derby. They finished up the track, and 6 others did not even make it to the Kentucky Derby. So there are still some questions to answer with regards to Cole Battle. Here's what we do know. He's a good, solid horse. He's versatile. He can be close to the pace. He can rally from behind, and he's 5 for 5 on dirt. So whether he runs in the Arkansas Derby or the Kentucky Derby next, he's a horse you have to consider. Again, I hope he starts in the Arkansas Derby. Let's talk about the other stakes race that was run last week. It was the John Battaglia on synthetic at Turfway Park. David, there was only one Derby Watch top 20 lister in the field. He scratched First Resort. Did we learn anything at all in the John Battaglia?
Yeah, and it wasn't just first resort scratching. There were a couple of key scratches in this race. Calling Card, who I know a lot of people liked, he'll be running in the Gotham instead. And it just made it a slightly softer race for some of the locally based Turfway horses. And we saw a nice battle to the wire between California Burrito and Baby Max. And we already knew that they had ability. California Burrito had run a decent speed figure at Turfway, and Baby Max had beaten Chunk of Gold, who did surprise some people by finishing second at a big price in the Risen Star in his next start. So I feel like both of these horses have talent, but they both got very good trips in this race, particularly California Burrito, who got to slow things down, setting the pace on the front end.
California Burrito got the greatest trip of all time, setting the pace on the rail, going slow, and he was game to win the race. He earned a 92 Beyer speed figure, by far the best of his career, and Baby Max also jumped up and improved 12 points off his most recent start. California Burrito is expected to run back in the Jeff Ruby Stakes. He's not going to get the same easy front-running trip, and that is due to the likely presence of a horse that was previously based in California named Charlie's to Blame. He wired maidens in California, went and won the Kitten's Joy at Gulfstream Park. His next start is going to be in the Jeff Ruby Stakes, and he's quick from the gate. Charlie's to Blame is. So not that California Burrito has to have the lead, but let's face it, the best race of his career was when he slowed it down in the Battaglia and went gate to wire. So I don't think he's going to get that same trip. Maybe he doesn't need it. Maybe he's just a 3-year-old who is getting better at the right time. I was reluctant to mention one other thing about the John Battaglia, and it really just irks me every time it happens. California Burrito was 5-1 when they loaded. He was 7-2 when they sprung the gate. So I'm just saying that just for the record. These late odds changes are something that the industry is going to have to deal with. What's it have to do with the Kentucky Derby? Nothing, but it's just something that bugs me every time I see it, and it happened with California Burrito. Okay, there's the PPs, a couple of good improving 3-year-olds who ran well on synthetic. Let's talk about our On the Bubble segment. We have a couple of new shooters to the On the Bubble segment this week, including gaming. David, you and I talked about gaming before we had our first Derby watch of the season. And when he ran so poorly in the Southwest, we said, well, we don't even need to discuss him. And maybe we don't need to, but he did come back with a fast workout last week, a 59-1 at Santa Anita, and trainer Bob Baffert is going to give gaming another shot in a points race somewhere. So we're going to put him on the bubble for now. I'm as skeptical as you are, considering he earned a 77 and 67 Beyer in his 2 most recent starts. But gaming was a good 2-year-old. Maybe he's coming back around. Any opinion on gaming?
Yeah, I mean, if Bob Baffert had not run him those 2 times following the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, he would be guaranteed to be in our Derby Watch top 10, forget about top 20. And I will say his 2 races since then, while they've been very disappointing, he did not have ideal starts on either occasion. He hopped at the start of the Los Al Futurity, and he was one of the horses that just had a disastrous start in the Southwest. So maybe you can give him passes for those races, but you don't want to see too many excuses piling up for a Bob Baffert trainee.
Exactly. And his next start will, determine whether or not he actually is a Kentucky Derby contender or not. He needs to get some points. He needs to run well. His workout last week suggests that he might possibly be coming around. Our other horse that we added to On the Bubble this week, we talked about earlier, Luxor Cafe, who won the Hyacinth Stakes and is the current leader of the Japan Road to the Derby points leader, along with John Hancock and Poster, 1-3 finishers in the Sam Davis, and Surfside Moon, who we expect to see in the Wood Memorial against Captain Cook and whoever runs well this weekend in the Gotham Stakes. Okay, before we talk about what's going to happen stakes-wise this coming weekend, we have 3 big races, the San Felipe at Santa Anita, Fountain of Youth at Gulfstream, and the Gotham at Aqueduct. Just a quick mention about a one other than allowance race on Thursday at Gulfstream Park. It's race number 8. A couple of the contenders are Jimmy's Dailies and Grande. And we will keep track of that allowance race. If somebody wins that 9 furlong race at Gulfstream the right way, they could potentially show up in the Florida Derby early next month. So we're going to at least monitor that situation. The best race, I think, this weekend, it doesn't have the biggest field, but it's a race of significance, and it's out in California. The San Felipe Stakes, race number 8, 50 points to the winner, and it features the comeback of Barnes in his first start around 2 turns. David, for a horse who started only twice and has never run long, He has been talked about and talked about and talked about. I'm almost to the point where I'm against him just because I'm tired of hearing about him. What about you?
It does kind of feel like the chatter around this horse doesn't quite match what you see when you look at the past performances, because his top buyer of 93 hardly makes him a standout among this crop, and he's never gone the two turns before. So it's going to be a real proving ground for Barnes on Saturday. But then you go and watch some of those workout videos on the way into this race, Brad, and you can kind of see where the hype is coming from, because this is an impressive son of Into Mischief who really touts himself in the mornings. We'll see how far he wants to go, because I think that's still one of the big remaining questions about Barnes.
It's a huge question. He cost $3.2 million at auction. He's been highly regarded ever since that sale. He's run well in both sprints. He trains well. I think he's going to control the tempo of the San Felipe, and he could very easily go gate to wire. He is one of three Derby watchers in the San Felipe, the other two being his stablemate Rodriguez and Journalism. David, with a couple of recent route races under his belt, including a better than looked runner-up finish in the Bob Lewis last time out, I think that Rodriguez can upset Barnes if he's able to stay in contact with the likely pace setter. I thought he ran very well. I'm going to end up picking Rodriguez in the San Felipe. And Journalism, who hasn't started in 2.5 months, he's not completely cranked up, but he's a very good colt. What are your expectations for Rodriguez and Journalism?
I think if Rodriguez is going to beat Barnes, they've got to get more aggressive with him than they were last time, when they sort of allowed his stablemate Citizen Bull to waltz along on the front end. If Rodriguez is ridden to win this race, I think he's got a real shot at it. And Journalism, I'm really interested to see what we get from him. He's a horse that, when I was handicapping this race, and they would actually find the video that I recorded earlier today with Mike Beer on the San Felipe on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. Subscribe and you'll get all of the stakes previews that we did for these Derby preps, in addition to future episodes of Derby Watch on the DRF YouTube. But regarding Journalism, I've been impressed with the workout videos that I've seen for him coming into this race. He seems like a horse that has really grown up over the winter time. And in retrospect, that Los Alamitos Futurity has produced 3 horses that have come back to significantly improve their buyers in subsequent starts. So maybe he's a little better than I initially gave him credit for.
It is his first start in 2.5 months. I think he's going to be rallying from behind over a track that generally favors forwardly placed runners. But I agree with you, David. I think that Journalism must rank as one of the top Kentucky Derby candidates based in California, based on his terrific 2-year-old season, how he looks in the mornings, his pedigree, everything about this horse screams mile and 1/4. Having said that, this is a mile and 1/16 on Saturday, and I don't think that Journalism has to win in order to move forward, but he does have to run well, and he does have to finish. Journalism, Barnes, and Rodriguez, the 3 Derby watchers in the San Felipe Stakes on Saturday at Santa Anita. Over at Gulfstream Park, another race with several Derby Watch listers, those being Sovereignty, Burnham Square, and the 2-1 favorite on the morning line is going to be River Thames, talking about the Fountain of Youth. David, what do you think about this field and this race?
I hadn't seen the morning line yet. I'll be a little surprised if River Thames is actually the favorite in this race, but it does kind of feel like Burnham Square proved what kind of horse he was last time in the Holy Bull, when he overcame some traffic and kickback to work himself into the clear and put that race away. And I'm not sure that he's meeting a field that's so much tougher than that in this Fountain of Youth. Obviously, Sovereignty has a lot to prove coming off the layoff, and I suppose his main rival could be River Thames, but I've got some questions about how far that horse really wants to go, and also the competition that he's been beating in his last couple of starts. So to me, it does kind of feel like Burnham Square's race to lose. We'll just see how much pace he gets to close into.
Yeah, I agree. The thing about River Thames is he could be out there on his own on the front end. And there are a couple of potential scratches out of the Fountain of Youth. McLennan and Solid Left both are entered in that Thursday allowance at Gulfstream Park that we mentioned earlier. So this could be a relatively small field. And speaking of small fields, we should at least acknowledge the fact that the San Felipe at Santa Anita has only 6 entrants. If there is a single scratch out of that race, the points that are awarded will be sliced by 25%. Only 75% of the points will be awarded in a 5-horse field that goes down to 50% in a 4-horse field. I guess the same thing could apply to the Fountain of Youth, because if those 2 horses do run in the allowance, one other scratch, and suddenly the Fountain of Youth is not worth as many points as we originally expected. David, Sovereignty has not started in more than 4 months. His win in the Street Sense was decisive. I have a hard time seeing him winning the Fountain of Youth first start back off a 4-month layoff unless he's simply the best horse in the field. What's your take on Sovereignty and his comeback?
Yeah, you know that I was really impressed by his performance in the Street Sense last year, but it does kind of feel like this race might just be a means to an end for Sovereignty, who's getting a slightly late start to his 3-year-old campaign. He's a horse who tends to take a long time to wind up to top gear in his races, and I just don't think that the short stretch at Gulfstream is going to suit him for this particular race, but it could set him up well for a 100-point prep down the road. And I have the same concerns that you do, Brad, about the pace in this race. I think there's some pace coming from the number 7, Neo Equos, who might be naturally quicker than River Thames, but beyond those two, unless McKellen starts here, and it seems like both of those horses could wind up in the allowance race, Solid Left and McKellen. And Mike Beer and I actually also did a preview the Thursday race of the day of that allowance race if you want to check out our take on that one. But yeah, field size is definitely a concern for the points that could be awarded and also for a closer like Sovereignty.
With those two horses on the outside, Neoquist and Keep It Easy stretching out from sprints, maybe River Thames is not going to get such an easy lead in the Fountain of Youth. The horse that I find a little bit interesting, not because I think he's a Derby candidate, I wouldn't normally consider a son of Munnings to be a Derby candidate, but number 1, Gate to Wire, trained by Todd Pletcher, stretching out for the first time. And the thing that I like about this horse is he ran fast last time out. He won the Swale Stakes by 5 lengths. He earned a 93 buyer. He got a 2 on Thorograph. He's arguably the fastest horse in the Fountain of Youth based on his win going 7 furlongs. Do you give Gate to Wire any chance to score an upset in the Fountain of Youth?
He definitely ran well last time. I would not deny that. I have some questions about how far he wants to go and what kind of trip he's going to get, because that was his first dirt race last time, and he got to just sit outside, perched in the clear. I think in this race, he's going to have to deal with some kickback.
Good point. He's down on the inside. He's going to have to take some dirt and then come around. So we'll find out how good all these horses are. Sovereignty making his comeback. David, you and I agree with Burnham Square. I think he's the horse to beat. I'd certainly respect River Thames as far as his development goes. Okay, the Gotham Stakes, it seems like it's a New York bred stakes race, but it's not. It's for open company, but a pair of very good New York breds who have yet to lose. They are a combined 7 for 7. Who are they in the Gotham?
Yeah, actually, the top 3 choices on my morning line are all New York breds. As I made Sand Devil 9-5, Sacrosanct 3-1, and Calling Card, I'll make the third choice at 6-1. He's also a New York bred coming into this race. But the New York bred crop seems like it's pretty good this year, and that is obviously led by Sand Devil, who is on our Derby watch currently. He's done nothing wrong in 3 starts. He's run a couple of 90-plus buyers. This is going to be a big class test for him, but I'm not sure how big, because both he and Sacrosanct beat a pretty good rival, National Identity, in each of their last 2 starts. I think what could be the real test for both of these horses is that they each want to be forwardly placed, and it does feel like there's quite a bit of speed in this race.
Yeah, no doubt about it. One thing that Sand Devil does have that Sacrosanct does not, and that is recent races. Sacrosant's coming in off a little bit of a layoff. He has yet to lose. I think that Sand Devil is a potential standout, but I'm reluctant to say that going up against an undefeated colt named Sacrosanct. So we'll find out. This race is the local prep for the Wood Memorial on April 5th, a race that is likely to be led by Withers winner Captain Cook and, of course, the Withers runner-up Surfside Moon. Well, before we sign off, just a quick reminder that next week's big race is the Tampa Bay Derby. It's March 8th at Tampa Bay, and that race is expected to mark the 2025 debut of 2-time Grade 1 winner Chancer McPatrick. He runs up against likely starter Patch Adams, who finished a better than looked 4th last time out in the Southwest Stakes. It's slightly more than 9 weeks to go for the Kentucky Derby. We're getting close to crunch time. This week, it's the San Felipe at Santa Anita, Fountain of Youth at Gulfstream, and the Gotham at Aqueduct. We will cover it all next week on Daily Racing Forum's Derby Watch Top 20. For David Aragona, I'm Brad Free. See you next week.